ready? Good morning. Welcome for coming out and also managing to come out so early in view of the time change that we had to throw at you. I'm Susan Saunders. I'm the Voter Service Director for the League of Women Voters and a stand-in for the President this morning. This meeting is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. We are a nonpartisan political organization. Our mission is to encourage the informed and active participation of citizens in government. I might add that we are also a gender-neutral organization. Since 1974, we have not limited membership to women only. We educate and we advocate and take action on things like campaign finance, social policy, natural resources, schools, transportation, and on, whatever's the issue of the day. We offer voter registration drives and nonpartisan ballot issue presentations. We invite you to check out our website at www.lwvbc.org and our voter website. Today's forum includes the legislators who represent the voters of Boulder County. We're glad you all could accept our invitation and make it here, and we appreciate your squeezing 2 meetings into your morning instead of just one. The forum format will be so that members of the audience can provide questions. Ushers will pick up the questions and deliver them to our team of reviewers. They make sure we don't have duplicate questions or things out of the realm of civility, let's say. The moderator is Jeanette Hillary. She's a league member and a volunteer league lobbyist at our state legislature. And she will be presenting the questions. We have timers here to give you a clue as to when you need to cut off your remarks. We will get to as many questions as we possibly can. There will be some photos taken this morning, and this whole forum is being filmed. There are notices on the door to let you know that you might appear on film. We ask anyone in the audience who records this message or this forum to respect the League's nonpartisanship and follow the FCC rules to preserve the content or intent of what's being said. And if you air the recording, you will record it or air it in its entirety. Thank you. Jeanette?
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, and good morning, and thank you all for coming out on our quick shift change here. Because of our condensed time today, I'm going to just ask each of you to give kind of a 1-minute intro on how you feel this session has been going, and anything about your particular bills or anything else you want to do it. And as I've spoken to a number of you, we're going to spend some time discussing the budget, some of the health and welfare bills, natural resource bills, and we cannot pass up the rain barrel bill. That has been a big newsmaker this session. But I'm going to start with Representative Casey Becker. I'll give you 1 minute. Thank you for coming and your perspective on what's been going on and how you're handling everything.
Thank you. I'll just give a little bit of background. I'm Casey Becker. I represent House District 13, which is western Boulder County, so the city of Boulder, and just keep heading west almost until you get to Steamboat Springs. So I represent western Boulder County, Gilpin County, Clear Creek, Grand, and Jackson counties. It's a big district. It goes from the Wyoming border to south of I-70. It's pretty diverse, and I love it, and I feel very honored to be able to represent the district. Most of my bills are still working their way through this session. We'll see how things end up. Now that the long bill, which is the budget bill, is behind us, we can move some of the bills that have appropriations clauses that cost the state a little bit of money through the process. So I have several of those pending, focusing on some public health, natural resources related bills in a and a few campaign finance reform type things.
Thank you. Okay, Representative Jonathan Singer, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm Jonathan Singer. I represent about 2/3 of Longmont, Niwot, Lyons, and Allens Park, so sort of northern Boulder County, up almost to the mountains. And once again, thanks for having me here. I think the big thing about this session right now, frankly, is our budget situation. We have a budget that is out there to make sure that kids have the right kind of education and get trained for the right kind of jobs, that we protect the environment, that we do all the things that government workers should be doing, including even safe roads and good transportation. But because of a lot of the binds, we're going to fall short of where our voters are expecting us. What I intend to do this year is focus on the things that we can do in a bipartisan way, whether it's kids, driver's licenses, or that all-favorite topic, marijuana. And I look forward to a good discussion today.
Thank you. Representative Mike Foote.
Well, good morning, Jeanette. Thank you very much for having us here. My name is Mike Foote. I'm House District 12 representative. That's roughly East Boulder County, including Louisville, Lafayette, and Longmont. And I'm very happy to represent House District 12 at the state capitol. I would say, since I have been at the Capitol, and that's been since the session of 2013 and all the way through now, one of my main focuses is to make sure that everyone's voices are heard at the state Capitol. There are, unfortunately, some voices that are much louder than others, and I don't think that's fair to all of us. So a number of bills that I've run, including bills this year regarding oil and gas and tax fairness, have been focused around that particular theme. And as far as how they're going, which is what you asked at the beginning, that's to be determined. But at the very least, we want to make sure that we can have everyone's voices heard at the Capitol as it should be.
Thank you. Representative Dickie Lee Hullinghorst, who's also Speaker of the House.
Thank you very much, Jeanette, and I want to thank you for all of your work. This is my 8th and last year, and I think this is my 8th and last time doing this, and it's my association with you and what you do for the issues that the League is interested in is very nice, and it's been good to have you at the Capitol. I represent House District 10, which is the most part of the city of Boulder, the part that Casey does not represent, about east of Broadway and up to, on Iris, up to east of Broadway and up to Broadway at the north, and then northeastern Boulder County. It's been a great privilege to represent this district and the city of Boulder and Boulder County in the state legislature. And I'm honored and privileged to be the Speaker of the House for the last 2 years and really have enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to talking about the budget.
Yeah. Okay. Senator Raleigh Heath.
Well, thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, all of you. This is also my last year. Dickie and I came in together. We had the privilege of both being majority leaders at the same time when the Democrats had the majority in the Senate. Thrilled that she's the Speaker. I'm the assistant minority leader, which isn't nearly as much fun as being the majority leader, I must say. And thank you all. The League has been terrific, and we've all benefited from your input into so many different areas, and that's made our jobs a lot easier, frankly. This has been a very, very tough session, just to answer your question directly. Certainly the toughest of the 8 years. It started out that way when we had the hospital provider fee issue in front of us before the session ever started. And it's continued through this whole conversation of the budget. The hospital provider fee is still out there. Yes, we balanced our budget, but we did it in a way that I am not very happy about. So we're going to have some time to talk about that. Thanks.
Okay. Representative Matt Jones.
Well, thanks, Jeanette, and thanks to the
Senator, sorry.
That's right.
I know who you are.
Thanks, Jeanette, and thanks to the League for doing this, and thanks for people who might be watching this. An informed electorate is so critical to our democracy. So this session, I continue to work on the things I've worked on before. Energy done right, and that means clean energy, not only for the jobs and the clean air and the climate, but because it's the right thing to do, and regulating oil and gas, making them accountable. Also, educational opportunity. We are not doing too well because of our budget in that way, and we need to do far better. In the budget debates, we're going to try to put more money in higher education, because otherwise there'll probably be a 7 to 9% tuition increases here, and that's the kind of thing I want to work on this year, so people have a shot at a better future, have that opportunity and the freedom to get ahead.
Okay. Okay, since everybody knows that the 500-pound gorilla in the room is the budget, I would like to have a discussion about the budget. For the audience, the budget is called the Long Bill in the Colorado Legislature, and it is introduced this year in the House. It alternates depending on the Joint Budget Committee or with the Senate. So the House has had it this past week, and they have slugged their way through a lot of it. There were some interesting things going on. The other elephant in the room is, as a couple of you mentioned, the hospital provider fee, and whether or not this should be considered part of Tabor, and would that influence returns in the overall budget? Should it become an enterprise, whatever? The other thing that also was distressing to the league was that the entire air quality control division of 95 employees had been stripped out. And I know it was amended in the House, but now it's going to the Senate, and we shall have some discussions and amendments, et cetera, going on there. So why don't we start with Dickie Lee Hullinghorst. I'm going to sort of give about 7 minutes to the entire topic or more, but I'll try to switch around to different members of the delegation and have you talk about it, and also the perspective of what's going to happen in the Senate this week. So, Representative Hullinghorst.
Thank you. Well, we did spend all of the week on the budget and the ancillary bills that go with the budget to implement certain budget items. We introduced it on Monday. We had an almost all day long Appropriations Committee on Tuesday, passed it out of Appropriations Committee. We heard it on second reading and debate on Thursday, and yesterday we passed it on third reading and sent it over to the Senate for action, and they will probably spend most part of next week on the budget. It takes that long. It's a several hundred-page document, and with budgets for all of the departments. Considering what we had to work with, which is unfortunate in a time when our revenues are increasing, considering the fact that we have Tabor, Taxpayer Bill of Rights, that puts a cap on the amount of revenues we can collect regardless of our population increase and so many other things, and the services that we need to provide to people and that they expect. We were up against that cap and needed to provide refunds if we didn't stay within that cap. So we'll talk some more, I'm sure, by other people about what had to happen to the budget. But I was grateful that our Budget Committee worked as hard as they did, and we didn't have to go into the negative factor in K through 12 education. We were able to keep with an even keel on funding for education, just increasing for inflation, not dealing with any more of the negative factor or paying any of that back. We did not have to cut higher education, which we were afraid we were going to have to do. We did implement what's called the 228 transfer, but we had to take $50 million out of that to balance the budget. That was one of the things we did. So we reduced what would have been a fair amount of money, $200 million, to transportation. We had to reduce that. So there were some things we had to do that were not helpful, but all in all, we made it out okay. Yeah. Now, if we're able to pass the hospital provider fee and fix the glitch that we're facing relative to Tabor, it's the only legislative solution that we have. And I believe very strongly that we are responsible to take care of that issue if we can. If we are able to do that, and I think it's very uncertain whether that will happen in the Senate or not, then our budget for this year will be far better. And we will be able to not take a cut in the actual rural hospitals that we had to do in this budget, which is one of the big cuts, one of the big problems that we have in our budget. And for next year, it will make it a lot easier. We're facing a refund responsibility of over $200 million next year if we don't, and that's $200 million that will require us to cut education next year and transportation and any number of things. So we're facing some huge problems. And it's a good idea to start talking about those.
Okay. Representative Becker, could you add to that since you went through it this week?
Well, I was just going to add a little bit about the Clean Air Act. There was, as you mentioned, a move to defund the entire Clean Air Act program in the state. So that's about $10 million. It's 95 employees. It was an attempt to attack the state's participation or commitment to continue to implement the Clean Power Plan, even though that plan has been stayed in federal court. But the entire air quality program is much, much bigger. And it doesn't. If we do that, we risk as a state losing our delegated authority from EPA. So EPA says, here's the act. Each state, if they meet certain requirements, gets to implement it on its own. So it's not a smart move for the businesses in Colorado who actually have to get permit reviews, new source review, new source performance standards, different types of permits to continue operations. And so it's not a smart move for the state. 95 employees would be laid off as early as June. And it's not a good idea really for the public health and air quality for the state. There's dozens of really important chemicals that are regulated that are in our air through that process. And we don't want to risk that.
Okay. So the budget's going over to the Senate this coming week. Senator Heath, do you want to address some of those? What's going to face you this week?
Well, what's going to face us is exactly what the speaker was talking about. And if you gather a little frustration when I speak about this, you're absolutely right. Because if you listen carefully to what the speaker said, it's okay. And we did. The Joint Budget Committee did an incredibly creative job of balancing this budget. But the how, I mean, we didn't take $73 million out of basically rural hospitals. We took $146 million because we lose the federal match of the $73 million, the 73 that we took out, which is going to devastate rural hospitals. And I've already gotten emails and texts from hospitals that basically say they're going to go out of business because there is no way they can continue if we continue down this path. Yes, the hospital provider fee is going to come up in front of us, but I think when you understand where the other side is coming from, and that's less government and lower taxes, passing the hospital provider fee flies in the face of that because basically they like limited government. I mean, this is just who they are, and that's what they stand for, and they're proud of that. Happens to be not where I happen to be. But I think that's the conversation. So we're going to press hard to try to get the hospital provider fee passed, but I think it's going to be very, very difficult to do it, and we're going to have to, I think, live within this budget. Hopefully we'll have an initiative on the 2016 budget that will deal with this and try to debruce to allow us to retain in the future all of the taxes we take in.
Aside from the hospital provider fee, yes.
So I think the budget will pass as it is. We're going to have a lot of discussion around very few dollars, but that's what's going to happen, I think.
Okay. We thought we'd start with the budget since a lot of you mentioned it, but it always comes up in some of the talking of other bills that are coming up. I'd like to have Representative Foote and then also Senator Jones talk about some of the oil and gas bills that have come up recently and where they are, and maybe if you can do it in a minute and a half each, because you're both sponsors and co-sponsors of the bills. Okay, thanks.
Sure. I'm happy to talk about a bill that I'm sponsoring in the House and Senator Jones is sponsoring the Senate. It's House Bill 1355, and it's designed to make sure that Local governments and their residents have a say in what happens in their backyards when it comes to oil and gas development. Right now, unfortunately, the industry goes to the state agency, the commission, COGCC, and they get a permit about where they're going to drill. And then they go to the local governments after that and say, hey, here's our permit, so let us drill right here. Now, if the local governments say, whoa, wait a minute, maybe it should be over here instead of over here, then sometimes some of those industry players say, no, we're going to drill here because we have the state commission permit, and you're going to let us do it, or we're going to sue. And in my opinion, and I think others, that's fundamentally unfair to local governments as well as to their residents who want to have some kind of a say in what's happening in their backyards, which they don't really have right now. So the bill is designed to try to remedy that and make it much more balanced. Obviously, or I should say of course, we're facing very stiff opposition from the industry because the current system as it stands works very well for them, but it doesn't work very well for the rest of us, particularly people that are in these areas that are affected by drilling. So certainly I'm hoping that we'll be able to pass that through the House and put it in Senator Jones's able hands in the Senate and see where it goes from there.
Okay. Senator Jones, I know you've also run another oil and gas bill, as well as you're the co-sponsor of 1355 on the sightings of oil and gas operations, and your take on what's going on with that industry.
To pick up on what Representative Foote said, before I do that, I represent Longmont, Lafayette, Louisville, and part of Erie. But to pick up on what Representative Foote said, oil and gas is the only industrial activity where they can come in and literally put it in your backyard without the local government saying, no, we don't want it here, we want it here. And that's just not right. And as long as they keep doing that, we're going to be running these bills. There are over 50 oil and gas lobbyists, so it's an uphill fight. But the thing is, it's right. In Lafayette and Longmont, they passed a ban to not have fracking in the city limits, and that's where people are. The other bill I ran this year that actually died in committee, but it changed the mission statement of the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, the commission that oversees oil and gas, to make it a more balanced commission. Right now, when you look at their decision-making, it's largely on the side of oil and gas and not on these neighbors and the neighborhoods and the residents that these things go in near. So we're pushing on a number of fronts. We've been doing this for a number of years. We're going to continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we move on to Casey Becker has run a number of water bills and other natural resources bills. And then I know the rain barrel bill was not your bill. It was Representative Winters and Danielson's and Senator Merrifield's. But it made a lot of, it was a big bill. It was a happy feeling bill this year. Maybe you could talk about some of those issues and what's going on in 2 minutes. And if anybody else has any other issues, what's going on in the Senate, because that's where a lot of the play was going on with the rain barrel bill. So.
Sure, and I worked a lot on the rain barrel bill. It was actually Representative Escar and Danielson, and worked a lot with them on it, and finally got to a point, so last year it died in the Senate. One particular senator, Jerry Sonnenberg, just opposed to it because he thinks it potentially takes water from downstream users, because the water that falls off of your house then ends up for us in the South Platte. And he wants that water all for farmers. There was a study done by Colorado State University that indicated there would absolutely be no effect whatsoever to downstream users, even if millions of rain barrels are used on the Front Range. And so he kind of lost his argument there, but still opposed it for quite some time. I think in the House we added an amendment that said if there is actual injury to downstream users, then the state engineer can tell people to stop using rain barrels. But I think it was a huge success to talk about really the value of conservation. What Colorado faces, we think about a 400,000 acre-foot gap in the next 20 years. An acre-foot is enough for about 4 families to live off of. We're expecting a lot of growth in Colorado, and if we want to protect our western rivers, we've got to really focus on water efficiency and water conservation to make up that gap. So those are a lot of the bills I've been working on because I represent part of the Western Slope, and my entire district really values the natural environment and wants to see those economies and those rivers thriving. But there is a huge amount of pushback because that's not the way Colorado water law is set up. It doesn't encourage water conservation, and we have a real uphill battle, and it's the type of thing where you have to run a bill about 3 times before it can pass.
Yeah, and we're talking about only 110 gallons, 255-gallon drums for rain barrels to provide it for watering your, as they said, your tomato plants, et cetera. And I know there's a water banking bill coming up now, and which we've already been doing in the Arkansas, so that's very good. Why don't we talk about some of the education issues, and maybe Senator Jones, if you could start with, what are some of the issues you see in education, and then we could we'll do someone from the House and some of the education bills going on there. And 2 minutes on some of that.
Yeah, we work on this in a couple different ways. We work on it in the budget, and then we work on it through bills. On the budget side, given our budget and given the limitations we have, we did not cut higher ed or K through 12, but we didn't add any money to them either. We kind of treaded water, and we need to do better than that. We had huge cuts a few years ago because of the down economy, and we need to restore that money so that kids can get more instruction time in classrooms and other people can go to college without coming out swimming so much in debt. And that's the other thing we worked on this year, is that we had a package of bills in the Senate and the House to help people afford college. It's the budget part of it, and then on the student loan side, we had a know before you owe bill so that people know what they're getting into. We tried to limit private loans, which can go up to 18%. We found, 16% was the highest we found. That's absurd when you can get money for about a percent, a bank can. So those are the kinds of things we do, and the reason we do them is because in our country, we have a public education system that lets people access opportunity. They can get ahead by applying themselves and working hard and getting a good education to better their lives and achieve the American dream.
Okay. Is there, Representative Singer, do you want to respond to any of those, or what's been happening with some of the other education?
No, I appreciate that. I'll just mention one thing very quickly, and that is something that deals with education, but in my former life as a social worker, there was an amendment to the Long Bill that fortunately failed that would have defunded the Healthy Kids Survey and put that money into a dropout prevention program. That sounds good until you realize that this is a survey that gives us the understanding of where the trends are going for our youth. Is it, are kids preferring one drug over another? Are they starting using at younger ages? Are they getting bullied because of their sexual orientation? We don't know these things, and we can't measure these trends unless we ask. And that's the least we can do, is ask, instead of guessing and then throwing money at a problem. So I hope as the Long Bill goes over to the Senate that we can make sure that our kids, before they can learn, they've got to stop being bullied. Before they learn, they've got to be able to know that they have other options out there instead of using drugs. So it's one of the things that we should be keeping our eyes out for, but in the interest of time, the only other thing I'll say is that we need to continue our focus on teaching over testing. We've heard this loud and clear from students. We've heard it loud and clear from administrators and teachers. This has gone across the board, and while you probably won't see a lot of movement in that direction this year, you did see some good steps last year, and it's something that we need to continue to keep our eye on the ball.
On higher education, it has been one of Senator Heath's major issues, and going towards job development, and there is a whole jobs development package again this session. Can you talk about what are some of those issues and programs and how that's progressing this year? 2 minutes.
Thanks. And the way I like to look at it, I don't like to just talk about college because one of my passions has been, I guess coming out of my life in manufacturing, is career and technical education as well. And we have really led the country in some of the things we've done, frankly, over the total 8 years that that the Speaker and I have been here. We put in place probably the preeminent concurrent enrollment program in the whole country, where a student can basically take courses while they're in high school at the community college level, and basically through concurrent enrollment can actually get their high school degree and their associate's degree at no cost to them. The president has been talking about doing this across the country. We've actually been doing it, and last year's package of bills that we passed basically improved that and added to it. The other thing we've done is we've had a huge emphasis on basically internships and apprenticeship programs. We have a number of bills that are in the hopper, and the House will start now being able to get to them now that they've passed the bill, and hopefully pass them so they'll get to us. That gives employers and community colleges incentives to put in internships, apprenticeship programs. So not only does the student come out with their associate's degree, but they also have a skilled trade. And in most places in the country, the employers benefit because they now have a skilled workforce to hire from. We have, at the present time, over 5,000 jobs that we do not have the skilled workforce to meet. This is not a Colorado problem. This is a universal problem across the country. But we've done more than any other state to handle this and to deal with it, and I'm very, very proud of what we've done. And this is one we can take bipartisan credit for, because these have been all bipartisan bills.
Yes. Okay, thank you. One of the big issues for the league, obviously, is voter service issues. And there's been a variety of voter service bills or election bills and whatever in the legislature. I'm wondering who would like to maybe start with that, Representative Hullinghorst. And some of them are cleanup bills, others are helping to clarify. Should we have mail-in ballots, permanent motor voter, what other kinds of things? 2 minutes on that?
Thank you. Well, I was very, very proud. I will consider it one of my major legislative accomplishments to pass the Elections Modernization and Access Bill. That was in 2013, or something in that neighborhood, 1303, 2013, I think that's where it was. In any case, that set a standard that I'm really thrilled. The Pew Foundation did a study of election systems all across the country, and they determined that this was the best election system and the most effective in making sure that we get the turnout that we need and being very user-friendly for the public. So I'm very proud that we managed to do that. We have had several bills over the next few years that clear up issues and implement that, and most of those bills are fairly minor, as they are this year. There's a good hard look at now at automatic registration. We need to improve our connectivity between our departments, IT operations, and some other things like that for the clerks to be able to implement that. I'm hoping that when that happens, that we will move forward to do automatic registration based on change of address and other things like that, which is almost happening now, but we need to have some more technology to do that. So we have a few bills, but they're really pretty minor. They're mostly cleanup bills to that original.
Yeah, they've been. I know last year, Representative Singer, you had run the bill on having 16-year-olds register. And what's some of your perspective on voter registration and what's going on?
No, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the league's support and actually passing that bill. It was to allow 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote, not to register to vote. But what it's done has been amazing. When you hear back from high school civics teachers, when you hear back from youth that don't feel like they're part of our democratic process, they now understand when they get their driver's license, they can get a fast track into a voter registration system. So when they turn 18, the first thing they don't have to worry about is whether or not they're registered to vote. So the next step, and this was probably something that is too late in the year to bring up this year, is I've been approached by another group of well-organized youth that have looked around the country and have seen 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote in certain local elections, whether it's school board or city council. We know the voter turnout in those elections is minuscule in those odd-numbered year elections. And so allowing school districts or cities to make those decisions for our youth and to say, you know what, you're part of the solution is an amazing thing. And so it started a conversation, and frankly, like our speaker said, Representative Hollinghorst said, the Pew Research Center looked at this. They said this is great for voter access. Whether you're Democrat, Independent, or Republican, these are the things that actually work and get people involved. And when more people turn out, I think we end up with better outcomes.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have a comment that, yes, please.
Well, I'm just so excited about it that I have to share this, but a bill that is working its way through the process right now that I'm doing with Representative Brittany Pedersen aligns our school board races with the campaign finance that happens in all of our other races. And we are seeing more and more money going into school board races. There was over $1 million in the Jefferson County race this past year, as much in the Douglas County race. Even in Boulder County, we're seeing more money spent in school board races for volunteer unpaid races, but they're very hot issues in education. The reporting on it is not consistent with what we do elsewhere. So we're aligning that to make more frequent reporting that aligns actually with the timing of the school board race rather than months and months afterwards. So I think that'll really help in terms of voter transparency.
How is the Senate handling some of the voter, the transparency for campaign finance? In the bill's just in the House right now, so it hasn't made it to the Senate. Is it an issue on your radar at this point? No, because it's not up for vote next week. But either of you, Matt Jones or Raleigh Heath?
In the past, it's been huge issue. I chaired the State Veterans Military Affairs Committee, and we had a huge number of issues during the time that the Speaker ran this, and we were able to get it passed at that point in time. I think it would be a little more difficult right now. These bills typically are very partisan in the Senate, and I would think we will continue to have that. But we did. We made a lot of progress, and I think our intent, certainly from Senator Jones and myself and our caucuses, has been to make sure we keep it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'd like to turn to Representative Foote. He's been running a number of bills dealing with corrections or other issues related to the legal system that way. Can you talk about some of your bills and what sort of the tenor of the House is, at least, on either changing in corrections or sentencing or other things that are going on in 2.5 minutes? Yeah.
Sure, I can talk. I guess I can first talk about probably one of the major issues that's in front of House Judiciary, not just this year but years past, and where we are on that, which is mandatory minimum sentencing, and what the debate is on that. And then if I have time, I can talk about one of my bills that I've run that's in appropriations. Like so many criminal justice bills, there'll be an appropriation if you increase a sentence or if you do something along those lines, and so that deals with the budget as well. It's been very interesting to hear perspectives about mandatory minimum sentences. We've been dealing with it very piecemeal, I think, unfortunately, over the last several years. And it continues to be piecemeal, which I think is a problem. But we have a kind of meeting of the minds between say, your ACLU folks on the one side and Americans for Prosperity, Koch brothers on the other side. So they're opposed on so many things, but then it kind of comes around in this circle on this issue. And so we've been discussing that quite a bit in Judiciary Committee, and the thought is that mandatory minimum sentences sometimes lead to unjust results. And the point of the justice system, of course, is to try to make sure that we can reach just results. And there seems to be, I think, a coalescing consensus that there needs to be some reform in this area. The devil is always in the details, though, and there are a number of bills over the last several years that have taken a stab at trying to do that reform, but it's been very piecemeal. Part of what I've tried to point out, because of my experience as a deputy DA in committee, is that sentencing in Colorado is probably the most complicated part of our criminal code. If you talk to people with 10 to 15, even 20 years of experience in the system, including judges, they sometimes get it wrong because it's so complicated. And it's just because we have it's almost like a decision tree. If this, then this, then this, then this, and goes down. And I think some of these piecemeal bills make it worse. And so my approach would be that we have some kind of deliberative process to deal with this, given our coalescing opinion, to try to make sure that this issue is dealt with in a fair way. So I'm basically out of time dealing with that, so I won't talk about my bill at this point, but we can pick it up later if you are interested. It deals with victims of strangulation and making sure that they are given the same protections throughout the state as they are here in Boulder County, and I'm happy to pick that up later if you're interested.
Okay, while we're on it, why don't you just explain the bill?
Sure. Sure, I'm happy to. Strangulation, particularly in the domestic violence context, is one of the most dangerous assaults that we have. It takes between 8 and 10 seconds at the most, if you do it right, to render someone unconscious. And just a little bit more than that to cause even worse results. And we see it very often in the domestic violence context. It's one of the most personal types of assaults where the victim's life is literally in the offender's hands. And this is a very serious offense. Unfortunately, across the state, there are different results depending on where it is prosecuted. Here in Boulder County, the District Attorney's Office for years has done a very good job of prosecuting these offenses in a serious manner and making sure that victims are protected and making sure that offenders are held accountable and then hopefully rehabilitated so they don't continue to do so. There are other places, though, because of the way that our law is set up, where it's prosecuted as a misdemeanor or not prosecuted at all. And so the bill is designed to make sure that we can prosecute these types of very serious offenses on a level playing field and make sure that victims are protected. It's a bill that does have an appropriation, so we're trying to figure out what's happening with the budget, and once we do, perhaps it will move forward this year.
Okay. I'm going to segue over into some child welfare issues, and I'd like to have Representative Singer talk about some of the child welfare issues and some of the bills that he's been running in that area for 2.5 minutes. 2.5?
I appreciate that. So 2.5 minutes. I only have 4 bills, so I'll try and give it about 30 seconds each and see how far we get. Child welfare is the real reason that I got involved in our political system. We know that kids under the age of 5 and especially under the age of 1 are particularly vulnerable because they can't talk. And so we have to be their voice. So I've got 4 bills right now dealing with different things. One of them has passed both the House and the Senate with wide bipartisan support, and it's just to true up our child protection ombudsman system. The only thing I don't like about the bill is the word ombudsman because it's hard to say. But what this does is it provides an independent third party out there through our judicial system that can look at cases in child welfare where people feel like they've been either aggrieved or the state hasn't taken the right steps to protect kids. So that passed, like I said, with wide bipartisan support. In addition to that, we're taking another stab at a bill that I've actually opposed for the last 3 years that makes sure that our child protection system can deal with families that are struggling with substance abuse in an appropriate way that doesn't stigmatize or disproportionately affect communities of color, but at the same time gets to the heart of issues. So it'll create a new definition of what child abuse looks like when substance abuse is involved. Whether that substance is marijuana or alcohol or prescription drugs, it doesn't matter. What matters is what the parent's behavior is, and I think we can do better with that. The last 2 bills that I have, and we'll see how close I get to my 30-second time slot, is to start innovating in our system. We use predictive analytics all the time in the business community, but what about having a real-time look at what's going on a specific child protection caseworker's caseload? So there are people out there in private industry that have stepped up in other states where someone can look just at a computer screen and look at the families that they have on their caseload and see who's at risk, who's more at risk today as opposed to yesterday, as opposed to making an educated guess. If we can start a pilot program here in Colorado that does that, we can yield better results, have greater job satisfaction, but also make sure that our vulnerable kids are protected, and we know who our most vulnerable kids are. The last bill that I'm hoping to introduce in the next week or so is to provide more options for foster parents. Foster parents are the bread and butter of the child welfare system. These are people stepping up for kids when they didn't have to. And we need to do a better job of bringing more parents, more adults into that foster system to allow kids to have better lives and not be stuck in congregate care situations.
Okay, thank you. We're getting close to the end. I want to start doing some wrap-ups, and I'm going to start with Representative Casey Becker. And if each of you can take about a minute and a half, what you looking forward to for the rest of the session, which ends in May, or any of your bills that you think need some attention and you'd like to have the public or the league do some lobbying on.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks for organizing this. One of the first things I want to say is that the legislators from Boulder County, we really all work as a team. We work collaboratively. We support each other. We are lucky to have that. And we're especially lucky to have Dickie Lee as our speaker. Honestly, that gives folks in Boulder County a little bit more of a voice, and I'm so appreciative of that. I do have a few more bills that will be introduced in the next few weeks that I'm excited about. Affordable housing is obviously a growing issue in all of Colorado, not only Boulder, and some campaign finance stuff. But, some of these bills we aren't going to be able to pass, but I just want to say that there's value in trying it, seeing who shows an interest, what you learn in that process, who really comes out in opposition, who really comes out in support, so you can identify the issues in the bill and the people that you need to work with most. So I'm going to keep plugging away on those areas because I think, Boulder County, in terms of affordable housing that I'm working on, in terms of the campaign finance, and in terms of the natural resources issues will really benefit. So thanks for organizing this.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry I have to leave early. I just have parental responsibilities to deal with.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it, and we all do. Representative Singer, what's going on for the rest of the session for you? What are some of the issues you're looking at for a minute and a half?
Sure. Thank you. So, after our long bill has passed the House, I always say this is sort of the real world part of the session. If anyone watched that reality show, it's when people stop being nice and start getting real. And so this is something that's going to happen, and that means we're going to start asking those tough questions and coming up with tough answers. Some of the things that I want to make sure that we can focus on is continuing the drumbeat of investing in our mental health system. I think this is one of those issues that really shouldn't be partisan. In a lot of ways, has not been a partisan issue. In those terms, there's a couple things that I'll be working on. One of them, if we can find the money for it, is to repeat something that's happening right here in Boulder County. We have something called the EDGE program, where our sheriffs and Longmont Police and Boulder Police are able to have mental health workers inside police departments. So when that phone call for service comes out, and it's really a mental health issue, that officer doesn't feel compelled to arrest someone. That officer doesn't feel like they can just write down on the back of a card the name of a therapist or a counselor and hand it to them, but that person can get the help they need in that point in time. It's shown to decrease incarcerations. It's been shown to actually decrease the number of ER visits. We know these are the most expensive and least effective approaches to mental health. And so I hope we can continue that drumbeat in a bipartisan fashion these next few weeks.
Okay. Representative Mike Foote.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much again for having us here. I want to go back and talk a little bit about the budget in my 1 minute. And because that's obviously it's so important for the state, maybe a little dry, but very, very important. I think it's been mentioned, and I agree that our Joint Budget Committee did a great job putting together our budget, given our constraints, which are unfortunately mainly self-inflicted wounds. The way that our Constitution is set up right now, It really came forth on the floor on Friday when the Republican member from the House of the JBC, Joint Budget Committee, came up and said, we here in Colorado have the most complicated budget process in the country. And that is absolutely true. It's unfortunate but true, and it's because of our constitutional provisions, particularly because of Tabor. And we're going to be hearing more and more about that after the session, because I expect that we'll be having a ballot measure regarding that particular provision in the fall. It's unfortunate that we are celebrating the fact that we're actually not cutting schools and higher ed. We shouldn't be, it's great that we're not cutting them, but we should be in a position where we're actually increasing that funding. In higher ed, there's a correlation that's been shown that as state funding goes down, tuition goes up, and that affects everybody. And K-12, it's been well documented that we need to have more funding for K-12. So we're in a position where we're celebrating not cutting because of our budget situation. And it's not because we don't have the revenue. It's because of our constitutional provisions. So stay tuned. We'll be discussing this much more in the fall as well.
Yeah, and as you know, the League is very much involved in that and has been for years, and we will be following it also. Representative Dickie Lee Hollinghorst.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the League for doing this. And I agree with my colleagues that spoke before me, and particularly Representative Singer, who said that now we get down to reality, and that really is true. In the last month and a half of the session, we finally have to get to the issues that we have had conflicts on and try to resolve those. I've been working on those conflicts. That's one of my major responsibilities as Speaker from the beginning of the session and before that. But we do have some important issues that if we can resolve, I think will benefit the people of the state of Colorado greatly. Housing, affordable housing is one of them. It was one of our priorities, one of the priorities I mentioned when in my opening remarks to the Assembly. And I think that we have a pathway forward to get perhaps some good compromise on that and actually pass some legislation that will incentivize additional building of affordable units that will provide for rental and some other things like that. And I'd like to use my remaining time just to talk a little bit about the hospital provider fee and where we're going with that. As you all know, that's the only legislative fix we have to the glitch in our budget process that says that if you go above this Tabor cap, which is very arbitrary, you can't spend any more of the revenues you collect. And the hospital provider fee bill is specifically designed to move that fee to an enterprise, which is allowed for under Tabor, and will give us a significant amount of flexibility then to actually, even in this year, and there is a companion bill to that, to do some of the increases that we would like to see in education, K through 12, higher education, transportation, and restoring the rural hospital cut. So keep tuned. I'm working really hard on that right now. We'll see what we can do.
And so that would be House Bill 1420.
1420 is the hospital provider fee transfer, and 1421 is the enumeration of projects that could be done or money that could go into programs if we get additional revenues in by the September forecast. And we're expecting that we will.
Okay. All right. Big battles ahead. Okay. Senator Raleigh Heath.
Thank you. Well, I could go on forever on this subject, but needless to say, I'm going to be in the middle of the fight to get 1420 and 1421 passed in the Senate. I think it's an uphill battle, but we're going to do everything we possibly can. I'm going to echo what my friend Representative Foote said about bragging about passing a budget that does not increase education at any level when we're last in the country in funding higher ed and certainly in the bottom 10% in K-12 in a state that is one of the doing the best of 3.2 unemployment, and here we are basically having to do things like this. It makes no sense at all, which leads me into the initiative process. Thank you all very much for supporting it. You know, I ran for governor on this subject. I ran Proposition 103 to try to take care of it, and you all were there, certainly on Proposition 103. We're going to have one of three initiatives in front of us, all three of which will permanently debruce, at least allow the legislature to spend the money that comes in taxes. Two of the three, and I think one of which that will probably be on the ballot, will put 35%, a minimum of 35% into education, 35% into transportation, two of the things we've talked about. We really didn't talk about transportation a lot here, but, and then the other two parts of the budget, mental health and senior issues, that would be the balance of what we would be able to spend that money on. I think all of those I would hope agree are things that we would like to support, and you all have certainly been supportive of me in carrying bills on those subjects. So we have a real opportunity in the fall, and we all need to really work hard to make sure we get that initiative passed.
Okay. And Senator Matt Jones.
Well, again, thanks for doing this to the league. We appreciate that. Two things. One is we talked about oil and gas, but the other side of that equation is we need to be doing energy right, and that is wind, solar, energy efficiency. Boulder County is going to participate in a program on a bill I helped sponsor to use low-interest loans for small businesses to retrofit buildings and save money through time. And regardless of what the federal government does, we should be moving that way. That's our image to the U.S. We're a clean state. We're a great state that way, and we should continue to do that. And then I would just want to echo what you've heard before. On the ballot this November, you will probably see an opportunity to debruce. Now, that's code for saying we can spend all the money that comes in. No tax increase, just spend the money we came in. It's named after Douglas Bruce, the author who has since been convicted of tax evasion felonies, 3 of them. And that tells you kind of the mischief that was done in Tabor. It's not just about voting on taxes. It's a lot more than that, and it causes all sorts of issues. So where we are bringing in more money and everybody says, aren't you doing great? And at the same time having to make cuts, it just doesn't make sense. It's not a good way to provide service for people who really want it, to reduce traffic congestion, to have smaller class sizes so their kids get more instruction. Those are the things we want to do. And in November, people have a chance to do something about that in all likelihood. So I'm asking people to vote yes on that. And again, thanks for doing this forum.
Okay. I want to thank all of you for coming, and I want to say thank you to Representative Hullinghorst and to Senator Heath for the 8 years that you've been able to come and do our Meet the Legislators, which has been very valuable. We get very good feedback. I want to thank the League for organizing it, and our timers and our question takers and our audience. This will get to be distributed on other channels in the local governmental areas. We don't have that schedule right now. As soon as we have it, we will let you know. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you and have a good day.